1978, Jim Jones led his cultic following in one of the largest mass suicides in modern history. How were over 900 people deceived? They failed to heed the 4 words of warning that John MacArthur looks at next on Grace to You. Beware of false prophets. With those 4 words, Jesus warned against the lethal influence of false teachers, a warning that tragically went unheeded in the Jonestown community in South America. Surprisingly, many of Jim Jones' followers identified as Christians. Some were church leaders, Sunday school teachers, pastors' kids, missionaries, and graduates of evangelical Bible schools. So why didn't they recognize the false prophet who was deceiving them? And more importantly, how can you know if a false teacher is influencing you? Well, today on Grace to You, John MacArthur will show you how to recognize false prophets and respond to their unbiblical teaching. John calls the study simply The Way to Heaven. Follow along now as John MacArthur begins today's lesson.
Matthew 7, verses 15 to 20. Beware of false prophets who come to you in sheep's clothing, but inwardly they are ravening wolves. You shall know them by their fruits. Do men gather grapes of thorns or figs of thistles? Even so, every good tree bringeth forth good fruit, but a corrupt tree bringeth forth bad fruit. A good tree cannot bring forth bad fruit, neither can a corrupt tree bring forth good fruit. Every tree that bringeth not forth good fruit is hewn down and cast into the fire. Wherefore, by their fruits ye shall know them. The thrust of the text is found in the first line. Beware of false prophets. Now, there are 2 words in order to understand this passage that we need to focus on. The first one is warning. Men and women all over the world are standing at the crossroads of that decision. The false prophets are selling their particular perspective, and we have to preach the truth. And we have to call people to beware of false prophets. That's the warning. Beware of them. All right, let's look at the second word. The word is watching. Now, let me give you 4 words again under this second term, watching, that'll help you. Number 1, fruit is character. Fruit is character. What kind of character? What kind of personality? What's his attitude and his motive and his thinking? Perspective toward life? What kind of actions? What kind of lifestyle? What kind of pattern? All that character involves, from what I think to what I do. The first test of a false prophet is his conduct, his character as it becomes manifest. And I say that simply because you cannot get true righteousness from a rotten tree. Check his character. Check his lifestyle. Because whatever he is in his heart is going to come out. That's why they are filth, scabs, spots on your love feast. Peter says they have eyes full of an adulteress. They just go around lusting all the time. They are covetous children, hungry for money. Their whole lifestyle is wretched. They are lascivious. They are lewd, sensual, brute beasts. Now, mark this. They don't always look that way on the outside. Boy, they can cover that. They can cover it with ecclesiastical robes and trappings. They can cover it with a supposed Christian lifestyle. They can cover it by having a Christian organization that they belong to. They can cover it by hanging around other Christian leaders. They can cover it by talking about the Bible and Jesus Christ and salvation. And they can cover it so many ways. And they can cover it by making sure nobody finds out the truth about their real moral life. There's a lot of wretchedness going on. There's a lot of evil greed. There's a lot of money problems. There's a string of women somewhere, etc., etc. But maybe you can't find that. Where do you go secondly? You go to attitude. And you start looking for how they think and what's their attitude. Because very often they can suppress the outward visibility of their vile and evil insides. Their lifestyle may not be manifest. Let me give you an illustration. I think this is a good illustration. 2 Peter, look at it for a minute. In 2 Peter chapter 1, verse 4, I want you to notice a contrast here. In 2 Peter 1:4, it's talking about true believers. This is powerful. And it says about the true believers that, I just want you to notice down about in the middle of the verse, that we are partakers of the divine nature. True Christians have received the very nature of God. We are partakers of the divine nature. Watch this. Having escaped, watch this word, the corruption that is in the world through lust. Now, a true believer has escaped the corruption. That's a deep down word. That's the internal rottenness. We've escaped it. We have escaped corruption. Now go to 2 Peter 2, verse 19. And here are the false prophets. Now listen to this. While they promise them liberty, they themselves are the servants of what? Corruption. They have not escaped corruption. But watch this one. They have escaped, verse 20, what? Pollution. You know what Peter's doing? He is differentiating between internal corruption and external pollution. He is saying they've never been changed on the inside, but they've had the ashes of the world washed off the outside. You see, they've gotten rid of the external pollution, but they have never done anything about the internal corruption. See? That's what he's saying. And there are many false prophets who deal with the pollution on the outside. They get the pollution off. They look really good. Temporarily. And how are you going to tell them? I mean, you've looked for their action, and they look so good. And you can't find any moral skeletons in their closet. You can't find any problems outwardly. It all looks kind of nice. Then you start going behind that covering where the pollution has been washed and start looking for the corruption. And where do you go? You go to the motive. You go to the inside, the attitude. Now listen to me. You check them out, people. Check them out. Not only for your sake, but for the sake of the dear people who are trapped in their evil systems. You check them out. Unless their motive is genuine desire to glorify God, unless their motive is holiness, unless their motive is to overcome the offensiveness of sin, unless their motive is to magnify Christ, unless their motive is humility and selflessness,